Mira Lassen was the plain, spare daughter of the late miller of the frontier market village of Wenmoor, 3 days west of Brennan-Gar at the edge of the great oak forest. She had been the plain, spare daughter at the mill since her father's hand had given out and she had taken over the morning, grinding at 15. She had been the plain, spare daughter the morning the council signed her over to the Warlord. She was 24 that autumn, tall in the way of working women on the frontier, strong-built from 9 years at a grain bin and a heavy stone wheel, brown hair tied back at the nape, calloused hands and forearms from the rough work of a country mill since she had been a child. She had an old scar at her right temple from a horse kick at 6, a quiet pink scar of the long-heeled kind that did not draw the eye, and that she had stopped noticing in the bone glass at her sister's hearth 12 years back. Her left hand walked a little stiff from a winter 10 years back when the bone had gone bad, and the village bone setter had set it. Better than nothing. Worse than a Brennan-Gar healer. She could still use it. She could mill grain, carry, plane a dressed pine board. But it worked at 3/4, and the village had noticed. The village had noticed many things about Mira Lassen by 24. A plain face by the village's measure, not ugly. The village said at the fountain when Mira was not there to hear. But not the kind of face a man at the harvest dance turned to ask for. She had not been asked at the harvest dance in 7 years. She had stopped going in the 5th, and the village had noticed that too. She had stayed at the cottage when her mother died of a winter sickness 12 years back. She had nursed the father through his 3 slow years of dying when his lungs gave out at 51. She had been at the bed at the 2nd hour of the 2nd autumn morning of her father's last week, and she had laid the cold cloth on the worn, weathered face every 1/4 of an hour for the 4 days the dying took. Her sister Halden had been there too, married to Beric Holt the trader. But Halden had her own cottage and 3 children, and could not be at the bed every night. It had fallen to Mira, who had no man to come home to and no children to nurse, to keep the watch. Mira had kept it. Her father had died at the 3rd hour of the 4th night, his green-veined work, roughened pale hand in Mira's calloused one, his last word the word for her name. Mira had washed the body. Mira had laid the body out on the dressed pine bench Beric had cut for the purpose. Mira had walked at first light to the chapel gate of the village's small chapel at the north of the cobbled square, and had told the chapel keeper that her father was gone, and that the burying could be at the 2nd hour if the pine plot was open. It had been. The village had buried her father in the 3rd row from the chapel gate. Mira had stood at the burying in the black wool dress her mother had woven for her at 17 for a wedding that had never come, beside her sister Halden and her brother-in-law Beric at the foot of the grave. The village crowd stood with them. The chapel bell rang once. After the burying, Mira went back to her father's cottage at the south end of the cobbled square. There was no place for her there. Beric asked her at the door the next morning over a cup of beer if she would come to live at his cottage, since the father's cottage was now his by the village writ, and he was going to rent it out to a young couple come spring. Mira had said she would come. Svianek roof. She had moved her 6 possessions, horn comb, 3 iron pins, wooden cup. Dressed pine sparrow her father had given her at 12, leather pouch with 7 copper pieces from the mill, her mother's wool shawl, to a bed at the back wall of Beric and Halden's cottage, in the room behind the kitchen where the wool was kept. She had lived there 3 years, worked at the mill, given her wages to Beric the way a sister-in-law gives her wages to the man who feeds her. Quiet at the cottage, quiet at the mill, quiet at the cobbled square. She had not been bitter, not at the dances she had stopped going to, not at the careful pity of the widows at the fountain. She had been steady, which was what her father had taught her at the bed of his dying. Steady, Mira, steady is more than wanted. Steady comes back to itself. So Mira had been steady. The autumn the council came was the autumn after the bad winter and the marsh-clan raid. The two together had broken Wenmoor in a way it had not quite recovered from. The winter had been the worst in 20 years. The freeze came early and stayed late. 3/4 of the late autumn root harvest froze in the ground. 2 milch flocks died at the late winter starve. The mill had run at half its grain through the long winter, and Mira had taken 1/3 less wages. By the spring thaw, the village had been hungry. The marsh-clan raid had come at midsummer, a fast clan band of perhaps 15 marsh-clan men coming up out of the great oak forest at the 3rd hour of an afternoon, taking 3 of the village's young men at the lower field where they had been cutting the late hay. The band had taken the young men and a wagon and 2 milch cows and gone back into the forest by dusk. The village had not seen them since. 2 of the 3 young men had been the magistrate's nephews, the 3rd the smith's eldest son. The village had not been the same after, sour the way a village becomes sour when it has been hurt twice in 1 year looking around the cobbled square at the 2nd hour for someone it could send away to set itself to rights. Mira had heard the talk at the fountain. She had not paid it close attention. She had not thought it was about her. The village council came to Berwick's cottage at the 3rd hour of a cold autumn afternoon, 6 weeks after the first hard-killing frost. Magistrate Adric Tom came in front, in his long dark wool coat and his small steel-rimmed spectacles and his careful pale blue eyes. With the village clerk Vannon at his shoulder, carrying a thick leather-bound book under his arm. 3 of the village council men came behind. Berwick met them at the door. He brought them into the front parlor of the cottage. Mira was at the back wall in the kitchen mending a wool stocking with 3 iron pins on the small dressed pine bench. Halden was at the iron stove. The councilmen sat at the kitchen table. The magistrate set the leather-bound book on the table. Vannon opened it to a page near the back. The magistrate said, "Slow, Berwick, Halden, Mira, we have come to speak of the village's tithe to the Ironfoot clan." Berwick looked at Halden. Halden looked at Mira. Mira looked at him. The magistrate said, "You know the bride-tithe, the lord at Goldvale's writ. Every 20 years a frontier village under the seal may send a willing bride to the Ironfoot, and the Ironfoot will hold the village's stretch at peace for 20 years from the day. Wenmoor has not sent a bride in the 40 years of the writ. The lord at Goldvale's tithe book shows 3 brides sent from his 8 villages in those 40 years. All 3 lived their years at the Ironfoot in good standing. All 3 stretches have been kept at peace." Berwick said, "We have heard. The village knows." The magistrate said, "The council met last night at the chapel house. We had a hard summer and a hard winter. We lost 3 young men at the lower field, and the village has not got over it. The stretch has not been at clan peace since the spring of 15 years back when the lord at Goldvale's last big writ was signed. The council voted 6-2 to send a bride this autumn. Send who? The magistrate looked at Mira. He did not flinch. The council voted 6-2 to send Mira Lassen of the mill. Mira did not move. Wool stocking in her left hand, iron pin in her right. She said, in her steady, quiet voice, "Why me, magistrate?" The magistrate said, "Mira, the council has considered. You are of age, unmarried, without father, without child, a woman of steady work and good character. You will be honored at the Ironfoot in the way the writ requires. The Lord at Goldvale's tithe records show every bride has been honored. Why me of all the women of the village? The magistrate looked at his folded hands on the book. He did not answer at once. Beric answered, in the careful voice of a man who had been at the council the night before and had not voted against, Mira, the village has 6 unmarried women of age. 5 have been promised by their fathers. You have no father. I have you, Beric. I have signed the council's note. The note is at the chapel house. I am sorry, Mira, Halden at the iron stove did not turn. Her shoulders were stiff. She was not going to speak. Mira looked back at the magistrate. She looked at Beric. She looked at her sister's stiff back at the stove. She set the wool stocking down on the kitchen bench. She set the iron pin in the stocking. She stood up. She said, in her steady, quiet voice, when do I go? Halsh Drome, the wagon-master, comes from Brennan-Gar at the 2nd day after the next first hard frost. You will go with him. He will take you to the trading post outside the company gate at Brennan-Gar. The Warlord will meet you there. The handoff is at the trading post at the 3rd hour of the 3rd afternoon of the road. Mira said, I will go. She walked past the magistrate, the councilman, Beric. Her sister stiff back at the stove, she went out into the cobbled square. She walked the cobbled lane to the mill at the south wall, sat on her own bench an hour in the cold autumn light, hands clasped, eyes set on the rough-dressed pine of the back wall. She did not weep. She had not learned the habit at 24. At the 2nd hour she stood up and went back to Beric's cottage. She walked past the kitchen. She did not speak to her sister at the stove. She went to her small bed at the back wall in the small room behind the kitchen where the wool was kept. She took down her mother's wool shawl from the peg. She laid the shawl out on the dressed pine bench at the foot of the bed. She set on the shawl the horn comb, the 3 iron pins, the wooden cup, the dressed pine sparrow her father had given her, the leather pouch with the 7 copper pieces from the inside pocket of her sleeping shift. She folded the shawl around the 6 things into a careful bundle. She tied the bundle with a strip of clean linen cord. She set the bundle at the foot of the small bed. She sat down on the small bed. She waited. Halsh Drome came at the cobbled square at the 2nd day after the first hard-killing frost, as the magistrate had said. He came with his 2-horse freight wagon at the 1st hour, drawn up at the south of the cobbled square at the freight house. Mira walked the cobbled lane from Beric's cottage with her mother's wool shawl bundle in her good right hand. The village stood at the square watching her go. Halsh Drome was a man Mira had seen at the cobbled square many times. A tall, lean man of perhaps 50, weathered, honest face, long brown beard going to gray, dark wool freight coat over a cream linen shirt, dark wool trousers, brown leather boots, worn wide-brim wool hat, work-roughened pale hands. He had run the freight route for 23 years. He had carried mill grain from Mira's father's hand for the last 7 of her father's working. He had known Mira since she was 12. He came down, walked the 3 paces to Mira, took off his wool hat. He said, in the quiet voice of a freight driver who had been at this kind of work before and was sorry for it, "Good woman, Lassen. Halsh Drome, I will take you to Brennan-Gar in 3 days. I will not push the horses. We will be at the trading post at the 3rd hour of the 3rd afternoon. I have brought a wool blanket and a wallet of trail bread and dried mutton. Climb up when you are ready." Mira climbed up. She set her shawl bundle at her right knee. Halsh climbed up beside her and set the wagon in motion. The wagon rolled south through the cobbled square at the second hour of the cold morning, past the fountain at the center, past the chapel gate, past the huddled village in work coats, breath-smoking white, past Barrack Holt at his cottage door, who did not lift his eye, past Halden Holt at the kitchen window with her hand at her mouth, past Magistrate Adric Tom at the door of the magistrate's house, who set his hand at his chest in the civic gesture of a magistrate at the leaving of a village child, out the south gate of Wenmoor, down the lower freight road, into the great oak forest, and away. The village did not call. The village did not wave. The village did not sing. The village watched, and the village let her go, and the cobbled square was quiet for the rest of that day. The wagon road through the great oak forest was 3 days of dressed pine and oak. The slow creak of iron wheels on the rough road, the steady breath of the 2 horses pulling. Halsh did not push the horses. He stopped at the second hour to water them, the 5th to rest them, dusk to camp at the freight shelter. He set the wagon fire, the wool blanket at the back of the wagon for Mira's bed, his own bed, under the wagon at the trail edge with his work coat for a pillow. He did not speak much the first day. He spoke a little the second. On the second night he set an iron pot of trail stew at the coals, poured Mira a clay cup of his own beer, sat down on a log opposite her. He said, in the voice of a man who had been thinking how to say the thing, "Good woman Lassen, I have driven this road 23 years and 3 brides on it before you. The last was 12 years back, a young woman of Crossford named Saren Velt. She lived 17 years at the Ironfoot. She had 2 children. She died of a winter sickness at 34. The Ironfoot sent word back by my wagon at the spring after. It came to the magistrate at Crossford. He did not read it at the cobbled square, only to me and to the priest. The word said the daughter of Crossford had been keeper of the clan's herb garden and a voice at the clan council in her last 7 years. The clan had buried her under a yellow-leafed oak at the camp. The clan leader had carved her headboard in his own hand. The magistrate of Crossford had not read it aloud because he had been on the council that sent her, and was not certain the cobbled square would understand. I am telling you because you may want to know what is on the road ahead. Mira looked at the wagon fire. She said in her steady, quiet voice, "Tell me about the Warlord." Halsh said, "Vorkun of the Ironfoot. He has been a clan leader 16 years. He has been at the Lord at Goldvale's frontier council twice in those years. The Lord's clerk has spoken of him to me as a heart-fair man with the patience of a clan leader who has commanded a long time. In the 16 years he has held the clan peace on the Wenmoor stretch, the Ironfoot have not broken the writ once. It is by every account a man who keeps his word. He has not had a bride. He has not had a bride in 20 years of the writ. He has had no wife at all in the years I have known of him. Why now?" Halsh said, "I do not know, good woman. The Lord at Goldvale's tithe collector said only that the Warlord asked the Lord at the council last spring whether a bride from Wenmoor might be sent this autumn. He asked in plain words and plain common. The Lord said the writ stood, and any village under the seal might send. The Warlord said he would come to the trading post at the second day after the first hard-killing frost. That is what is known. The why is the Warlord's." Mira looked at the wagon fire a long minute. She said, "Halsh, thank you for the telling." Halsh nodded. He poured himself a clay cup of beer and drank it slow. They came up to the trading post outside the company gate at Brennan-Gar at the 3rd hour of the 3rd afternoon. The trading post was a cluster of dressed pine buildings on a cleared rise 100 paces beyond the iron company gate of Brennan-Gar. The Drywell Company did not have jurisdiction past the gate. The post was the lord at Goldvale's old clan trade ground, set 40 years back at the writ to let the clans come down for spring and autumn trade fairs without entering the gate. The clearing held a small dressed pine trade house at the center, a row of 3 small dressed pine drying sheds at the side, a row of iron-bound oak hitching rails at the front, and a small spring-fed water trough at the south. It was empty of trade at this time of the year, the autumn fair being 3 months past and the spring fair being 4 months ahead. Halsh pulled the wagon up at the iron-bound oak hitching rail. He set the brake, climbed down, came around to Mira's side, held out his work-roughened pale hand. Mira did not need it. She climbed down at the wagon step with her shawl-bundle in her good right hand. The cold autumn light was pale gold across the cleared ground. Mira stood at the wagon step with her shawl-bundle in her hand and her mother's wool shawl across her shoulders. She looked to the trade house and saw what was waiting for her. 4 figures stood at the front of the trade house in the cold, pale gold light. 3 were tall clan men, bright emerald green skin, otherwise fully human. Long black hair tied back at the nape, gray wool tunics and oiled hide trousers and heavy hide cloaks, soft brown leather walking boots, hunting bows slung across their backs with bowstrings plainly unstrung in the open sign of peace. The figure at the front was the Warlord, the tallest man Mira had seen in her life, perhaps a head and a half above Halsh at his side, broad-shouldered and heavy-built. Bright emerald green skin, otherwise fully human. Long black going gray hair tied back in a thick warrior braid past his shoulder blades. A long dark beard streaked with gray, woven with 3 bone beads at the chin. Dark eyes calm and direct on Mira at the wagon. A heavy hide cloak over a long gray wool tunic, oiled hide trousers, soft brown boots. A heavy leather warrior's belt with a long knife, a hand axe, a folded leather wallet. A heavy iron clasp at his throat, the clasp of his clan rank. A long iron-bound oak war staff in his right green hand, the foot set on the ground at his side. He stood with the steady stillness of a man who had been at war councils a long time and knew how to wait. Halsh walked the 7 paces to the Warlord with his wool hat in his hand. He stopped at 3 paces. He said in the voice of a freight driver at the Lord at Goldvale's tribute handoff, Vorkun of the Ironfoot, Halsh Drome of Brennan-Gar. I have brought the daughter of Wenmoor named Mira Lassen, of the writ of the bride-tithe, by the council's note signed at Wenmoor and the lord at Goldvale's clerk's mark countersigned at Brennan-Gar. He held out a folded square of paper. The warlord took the folded square of paper in his green left hand. He did not open it. He set it folded between his green left thumb and forefinger. He said, in slow, careful common, in the carrying voice of a clan leader who had spoken at council a long time, Halsh Drome of Brennan-Gar. I have the bride note. The clan honors the lord at Goldvale's writ. The clan peace will hold for 20 years from this day, on the Wenmoor stretch, whatever the rest of the afternoon brings. Halsh nodded. The warlord walked the 5 paces from the front of the trade house to the wagon. The 3 clan men did not follow him. They held their place at the trade house front. The warlord came up to the wagon step. He stopped at the wagon step. He looked at Mira at the wagon step in the cold, pale gold light. He looked at her face, the plain face, the small old scar at the right temple, the brown hair tied back. He looked at her shawl-bundle in her good right hand. He looked at her left hand, which she had not been able to keep from showing at her side at the wagon step, and at the slight stiffness of it. He looked at her steady eyes. He looked at her a long minute. Then he did the thing that, in 20 years of the bride-tithe at the trading post, no warlord had done. He set the iron-bound oak war staff down at his right side on the cold ground. He went down on one knee in the dust at the foot of the wagon step in the cold, pale gold light, in front of Halsh and the 3 clanmen and the company watchers at the iron gate 50 paces back. He said, in slow, careful common, the words plain and even, not loud and not soft, daughter of Wenmoor. I am Vorkun of the Ironfoot clan. I asked for a bride and was sent one. The clan honors what is given, but the clan does not buy women. And I will not have you sent because no one in your village wanted you. I will ride to Wenmoor at first light. I will go to your magistrate in plain daylight. I will ask for you in front of your village. You will say yes or no. The clan peace will hold no matter what you say. If you say no, you are free of the village. If you say yes, you come to the Ironfoot as my wife by your own choice in front of the village that did not want you, with the warlord seal on the asking. That is the only way I will take a wife. The warlord did not stand. He stayed on one knee at the foot of the wagon step. He waited for Mira to answer. Mira did not answer at the trading post. She did not have to. The warlord had said she would not have to answer until the cobbled square at Wenmoor, and had said it in front of his 3 clanmen and Halsh and the company watchers at the gate. The words were on the trading post ground and could not be put back. Mira looked at the warlord on one knee at the foot of the wagon step, at the Iron Clan clasp at his throat, at the bone beads in the long dark beard, at the dark eyes set steady on her own. She said, in her quiet, steady voice, Vorkun of the Ironfoot, I will ride to Wenmoor with you at first light. The warlord nodded. He stood. He turned to his 3 clan men and said 3 short words in the clan tongue. The 3 nodded. 2 turned southeast toward the horses tied at the edge of the trees. The 3rd walked the 7 paces to the wagon, stopped at 6, held his green hands open at his sides. He said, in slow, careful, common, good woman, Drev of the Ironfoot, the warlord's brother. The clan camp is a half-day's ride east. The clan is camped tonight at the freight stop 2 miles south. The warlord asks that you stay at the trade house in the north room, as the lord at Goldvale's clan trade writ provides. The freight driver may stay at the south. At first light we ride to Wenmoor. Mira said, I will stay. Thank you, Drev of the Ironfoot. The warlord nodded again, walked the 7 paces back to the trade house, spoke a few words in the clan tongue with Drev and the 2 clan men. Drev led the 3rd toward the horses. The warlord walked back toward the wagon, stopped at 3 paces from Halsh, held out his green right hand. Halsh shook it. Halsh Drome, I have known of you 12 years through the lord at Goldvale's tithe collector. You are a fair freight driver. Thank you for the road. Vorkun of the Ironfoot, I have known of you 16 years. Thank you for the kneel. The warlord nodded, walked back to his clan men. They mounted and rode southeast into the dusk. Halsh stood at the wagon a long minute watching them go. He turned to Mira. Good woman, I have run this road 23 years. I have not seen what I have seen today. The north room is at the back of the trade house. The bed has a clean linen sheet. I will be at the south. Walk in when you are ready." Mira walked in. She slept that night with her shawl-bundle at the foot of the bed, did not weep, did not lie awake. She slept the steady sleep of a woman who had been told the answer she had been waiting for. They rode out of the trading post at first light, the warlord at the front of the column on his heavy-dressed gray clan horse, Drev and the 2 clan men behind. Mira on the wagon bench beside Halsh, her shawl-bundle at her right knee. The cold autumn road ran north and west 3 days back to Wenmoor through the great oak forest. The warlord rode quiet alongside the wagon at his heavy pace. He did not push. He did not speak the first day. On the second day at the noon halt he came down from the horse, walked the 3 paces to the wagon side, stood at the wagon step at Mira's elbow. He said, in slow, careful common, "Mira Lassen, tell me of your father, if you will." Mira told him, the miller of Wenmoor for 32 years, dead 3 years of his lungs at 51, the dressed pine sparrow he had carved at her 12th year, the study as more than wanted he had taught her at the bed of his dying. The warlord listened. He nodded once at the end. He said, "A good father. I am sorry to have missed him." He climbed back on the horse. On the 3rd day at dusk he came down again, sat on a log opposite Mira and Halsh, and asked of her mother, dead 12 years of a winter sickness, who had woven the wool shawl across her shoulders. Her sister Halden married to Beric the trader. Her work at the mill, 9 years of the morning grinding. Her hand, kicked by a horse at 6, the bone gone bad 10 years back. He did not flinch at the stiff left hand. He looked at it in the firelight. He said, in his slow, careful common, "I know an Ironfoot woman who walks the same way. Yael, she has been at the iron forge 20 years and worked it well. She will be glad to meet a frontier-born who walks the same way." He said nothing about her face. Mira said, "Fokun, why me? Of all the daughters of all the Lord at Goldvale's 8 villages, why did you ask for a bride this autumn?" Fokun looked at the fire a long minute. He said, "I will tell you at Wenmoor, after the asking, not before. If the answer is yes, you will hear it at the clan camp. If the answer is no, you will hear it before we part at the cobbled square. I will not have the why be a thing that pushes the answer either way." Mira nodded. They came up to Wenmoor at the 3rd hour the 3rd afternoon. The village saw them coming at the south gate, 3 orcs on horseback, a wagon, the bride they had sent 3 weeks back. The cobbled square filled. Magistrate Edric Tom came out of the magistrate's house. The council came out behind him. The chapel bellkeeper came out at the gate. Beric Holt came out of his cottage, Halden behind him with her hand at her mouth. The smith left the forge. The mill hands left the mill. The square filled with the village in work coats and wool shawls and frightened watching. The warlord dismounted at the south gate, handed his reins to Drev, walked the cobbled lane on foot, alone, iron-bound oak war staff in his right green hand, left green hand open and empty at his side. Drev and the 2 clanmen held at the horses. Halsh pulled the wagon up at the freight house. Mira stayed on the wagon bench. The warlord stopped at 6 paces from the magistrate at the center of the cobbled square. He set the iron-bound oak war staff down on the cobbles at his right side. He said, in good common and the carrying voice of a clan leader, the words plain and even and not loud and not soft and clear to every doorway and every window of the cobbled square. Magistrate of Wenmoor, I am Fokun of the Ironfoot. You sent me a bride. I am giving her back. I do not take women who are sent because their village did not want them. The clan peace will hold no matter what. I have come to ask, in front of you, in front of her, in front of the village that did not want her, for the daughter of Wenmoor named Mira Lassen. If she says yes, I will take her to the Ironfoot as my wife with the Warlord's seal on the asking. If she says no, she is free of the village, the tithe is paid, and the clan peace holds. I will not ask twice. I will not ask quietly. I will not ask in private. The village that thought she was not wanted will hear the asking and will know the answer. The magistrate had nothing to say. The cobbled square had nothing to say. Barrack Holt was staring at the cobbles. The village widows who had pitied her at the fountain were silent. The chapel bell-keeper had set his hand on the iron of the gate. Halsh Drome stood at the freight house with his wool hat in his hand. The warlord turned from the magistrate to the wagon. He walked the 7 paces to the wagon at the freight house. He stopped at 3 paces from the wagon-bench. He went down on one knee in the cobbles at the foot of the wagon, in plain view of the entire village. He said, in his slow, careful, common, "Daughter of Wenmoor, will you come to the Ironfoot as my wife, of your own choice, knowing that the clan peace holds whether you say yes or no, knowing that you may say no and be free of the village?" Mira looked at the warlord on one knee. She looked across at Barrack Holt, who would not lift his eye, at her sister Halden at the cottage door with her hand at her mouth, at the magistrate in his long dark wool coat, at the village widows at the well, at the village she had been the spare daughter of for 24 years. She turned back to the warlord. She said, in her own steady, quiet voice, carrying clear in the cobbled square, the first clear word she had spoken in front of the village in 7 years, "I will come to the Ironfoot, Vorkin of the Ironfoot, of my own choice." The cobbled square was stunned. The warlord stood. He took from his own clan horse, which Drev had walked the 7 paces forward, a folded, heavy green and gray woven clan cloak from the saddle roll. He walked the 3 paces to the wagon. He set the clan cloak on Mira's shoulders himself at the cobbled square in plain view of the whole village. He turned to the cobbled square. He said in the carrying voice of a clan leader, "She is Mira of the Ironfoot. She is under the clan seal. She is no longer of Wenmoor. The clan peace holds 20 years from this day on the Wenmoor stretch by the warlord's word and the lord at Goldvale's writ." He held out his green right hand to Mira. Mira took it. She came down from the wagon-bench. They walked the cobbled square together, the warlord on foot leading his clan horse at the rein, Mira at his side in the green and gray clan cloak with her shawl-bundle in her good right hand. They walked out the south gate of Wenmoor with Drev and the 2 clan men and Halsh's wagon behind. The village watched them go in stunned silence. The cobbled square did not speak for the rest of the day. They rode east of Brennan-Gar to the clan camp at the high country at the 2nd day. The Ironfoot women met them at the camp gate. Yiel of the Iron Forge came out at the front, a tall green clan woman of perhaps 45, with a stiff left hand that walked the same as Mira's. She held out her green left hand. Mira held out her own pale, stiff left. The 2 clasped left-handed in the clan's greeting. Yael said, in slow, careful common, "Welcome to the Ironfoot, sister." Mira lived 23 years at the Ironfoot. She bore the warlord 3 children, 2 boys, Hesh and Tarek, and a girl, Halden, bright emerald green, fully human in proportion and feature, all loved at the clan fire. She became the keeper of the clan's herb garden and bone and feather work. She learned the clan tongue. She learned the clan songs. The Ironfoot women taught her the clan bread, and she taught them her mother's careful weave. In the 2nd year, Focung carved her a dressed pine sparrow that sat at the head of their hide tent beside the one her father had given her at 12. In the 3rd year he built her a stone and dressed pine cottage at the edge of the clan camp, because she had said she missed a hearthstone. In the 10th year she became one of the 3 Ironfoot voices at the clan council, the only frontier-born ever to sit there. Magistrate Halsh Drome died of a heart fault at 61 in the 8th year. His widow spoke at the burying that the warlord's asking had been the most clearly spoken kindness Wenmoor had seen in the magistrate's time, and the village had not deserved it. The village heard. Beric Holt died of a sickness at 52 in the 11th year. Halden asked Halsh Drome to take a small folded letter to Mira. The letter said only, he never forgave himself for signing. He spoke your name at the end. Forgive him if you can. Halden Mira read the letter at her cottage. She did not weep. She wrote back one sentence in her steady, careful hand. I forgave him at the cobbled square. Tell my sister to come to the spring trade fair next year. I would like to see her. Halden came. The 2 sisters walked together at the trade fair an hour. The sister went home and spoke of Mira's life at the cobbled square, and the village heard her. Mira died at 47 of a winter fever in the 23rd year of her marriage. Fokun, then 68 at her hand, by the dressed pine bed at the cottage. He buried her himself at the rise behind the cottage under the young yellow-leafed oak he had planted the year of their marriage. He planed and lettered her head-board himself in the slow, careful lettering she had taught him, Mira of the Ironfoot. Asked for. Answered yes. He set the 2 small dressed pine sparrows, her father's and his own, on a flat stone at the headboard. Vorkun lived 9 more years. He died at 77 in the deep of a winter. He was buried beside her at the rise. Their daughter Halden lettered his headboard, Vorkun of the Ironfoot. Asked, waited for the answer. Some marriages are bought in coin, some are bargained at the trade fair, some are dressed in white at a cobbled square chapel. And some, though the village does not learn the lesson until the warlord is ridden back into the square, are asked, in plain words, in front of the people who would not ask, with one knee in the dust and the answer waiting on its own pace. The plain bride no one wanted was, in the end, the only bride the warlord ever asked for. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like, it helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much. The Orc Keeper.